Gas prices. We hate these current gas prices. You know why? Because they cut into our earnings. Now, three reasons. Uno, dos, tres, un, zwei, drei, un, deux, trois. One, two, three reasons why gas prices are so high right now, right? You know that feeling, you're filling up there, right? You're looking at that, oh, ouch, ouch. I always have to hit this button over here, 485, and I look into those numbers and it hurts me. So gas prices in the United States have hit a 7-year high. Demand has increased as the economy reopened and Americans have began driving more. Meanwhile, supply has been constrained because of lower U.S. production and OPEC decisions. Oil petroleum exporting countries, OPEC, right? So Americans are once again feeling the pain
These
at
clay pots
the gas
can fire
pump.
to about 1200 degrees Celsius.
And it's because of a classic clash between rising demand and constrained supply. An October report from AAA found that gas prices across the United States hit their highest average level since 2014, higher than they've been at any point since 2014. It's gotten even worse since then. Data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, which found gas prices rising throughout 2021, hitting levels not seen since the middle of the last decade. Prices continued to spike throughout October, hitting an average of 3.41 gallon on November the 8th. I would love to fill up at 3.41. So there we have the U.S. average gas prices going up and up and up. The reason for the price spike are textbook supply and demand. From an economics textbook, Americans have got back to driving more this summer as the pandemic has moderated, and a combination of domestic supply interruptions and trouble in energy markets overseas have made crude oil more expensive, right? So blame those guys overseas. Demand is up as Americans take to the road again. As with so many other aspects of everyday life, the COVID-19 pandemic radically changed how Americans travel. Lockdowns and the uncontrolled early spread of the virus led to canceled travel and a sharp reduction in commutes. By summer 2021, however, Americans were back on the road. The number of vehicle miles traveled measured by the Federal Highway Administration plummeted in spring 2020, but in the last few months, highway traffic was back up to what would normally be seen in midsummer. There it is. Remember, it went down there in April. That increase in the amount of driving Americans are doing also means an increase in demand for fuel for cars. U.S. oil production and refining haven't kept up. So the U.S. oil production and refining haven't kept up with the demand. In addition to that ramp up in demand, there have been some big supply constraints as well. The Energy Information Administration noted in mid-September that Hurricane Ida shut down a large swath of the U.S. oil drilling and refinery capacity in the Gulf of Mexico in late August, while rigs and refineries have quickly come back online since. Crude oil inventories remain low, suggesting an ongoing lack of supply. EIA wrote that as of late September, oil stored at Cushing, Oklahoma, one of the main crude depots in the United States, was down 40% from the start of the year. Other EIA data shows that crude oil inventories across the country remain subdued. A crunch in the domestic oil supply and stockpiles, coupled with a rise in demand, leads to higher gas prices. Energy markets around the world are in a crunch. In addition to domestic oil supply slowing down, oil and energy markets overseas also aren't helping matters on the supply front. OPEC and other major oil exporting countries have repeatedly agreed to only modest increases in production, despite oil consumers like the United States and India pushing for higher exports. The cartel most recently agreed to increase production by just 400,000 barrels per day in December, after President Joe Biden directly called for more production to ease rising prices. So those guys overseas, the Saudis, oh, screw you guys. We're making money right now. Why should we pump more? We're making astronomical returns. So, we depend on these OPEC and Saudis and that really control our oil. It also shows how the cartel of oil exporters still holds a huge amount of power. I just said that in global oil markets, even as the United States has vastly increased production over the last decade, and countries around the world begin the process of moving toward greener energy sources. Broader energy markets have been facing supply shortages as well. European natural gas and electricity prices have skyrocketed, and traders expect higher oil and other energy prices for months to come. Russia, a key provider of natural gas to the EU, has held back on increased deliveries to the West, keeping prices volatilely high. So the Russians are also influencing it. Put together surging demand from the United States, reopening with supply crunches, both domestic and global, and it should be no surprise that gas prices are spiking. So there you have it, because I often get asked this question. We were quick to blame the Trump and the Biden administration, but I tell you, both administrations had very little to do with this, right? It's the way the pandemic has gone. It's mainly OPEC, right? Mainly the Saudis. They're just not pumping more, right? They controlling the flow of the oil. It's that cartel that runs the show, and demand is through the roof. Supply is not meeting it, and a couple of other factors, those storms, etc., etc., and Russia meddling in the affairs, and it's a recipe for disaster, folks. So there we go. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and please, you feel free to comment. What do you think the factors are? Honestly, what do you think is driving these gas prices up? All I know is Uber and Lyft and these rideshare companies and gig companies are not taking the high gas prices into consideration, right? They're still paying out so little to drivers, knowing that these gas prices have gone through the roof, and they're not adjusting their pay along with the increase of these gas prices, which is shameful. But we fight on, and hopefully this ends, these prices come down so that our margins become better. Have a good one.